Next on this holiday edition of MLR Weekly, Kimball Kjar, the CEO of the Utah Warriors, Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News, and John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning. Rugby Wrap-Up's MLR Weekly brought to you by Sheehy Auto Stores. It's easy at Sheehy. The Pig and Whistle, New York City, the world's best rugby pub. And Lean and Limber, stretching your way to a healthier lifestyle. Welcome to MLR Weekly as presented by Rugby Wrap-Up. Matt McCarthy in New York City on this Thanksgiving holiday week. And we hope you're having a great holiday with family and friends if you do celebrate Thanksgiving. And if you don't or you do, we have a great show either way. We have Kimball Kjar, the CEO of the Utah Warriors. We have Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News with all kinds of good stuff. But before we get to any of that, we have our recurring segment, Rugby Morning's Coffee Break with John Fitzpatrick. John, welcome. Where are you?
Well, Matt, safety first. I got to put on my seatbelt because I'm hitting the road. It is Thanksgiving week. Headed off to the parents in West Virginia.
West Virginia. And a happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. I am just very excited about the New York Sevens tournament taking place. Of course, it's always the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So I'll see you on the field, right?
Absolutely. I'll be there.
Excellent. What do you got for us, John?
Hey, Matt, a couple of things. One, we got a lot of things to be thankful. We'll cover that in a second. But Old Glory DC has to be thankful that they've signed young gun Logan Widener. He's a big guy. He's a lock. Interesting thing about him is that he's played age grade for both Canada and the USA, but he has signed a 3-year deal with Old Glory DC. If you're Scott Lawrence, you got to be pretty happy that he is coming down south to the U.S.
Yeah, and they locked him up down in D.C. for 3 years, and you don't just grow 6'5" plus on trees. That's a load of a young man. Good signing for them. And Scott Lawrence, not always emotional, was seen doing backwards somersaults outside the USA Rugby interim head coach offices.
You think we'll ever see him dance like the Razor down in New Zealand?
I just want to see the Razor dance like that as an All Blacks coach. That would be remarkable. And then the second most remarkable thing would be Scott Lawrence doing it as well. Next.
Hey, let's move on. There was a big trade between the Chicago Hounds and the San Diego Legion. The San Diego Legion, a little bit of a head scratcher here. They sent scrum half Jason Higgins to the Chicago Hounds for hooker Hugh Roach. Matt, what do you think of that one?
Well, as Bryan Ray will talk about later in the program, because I know you didn't see the notes on the program while you're in your car, San Diego's in need of a hooker, plain and simple. Next.
Aren't we all, Matt? Aren't we all? But hey, Matt, I wanted to just say, aren't we a lot to be thankful for? Certainly, let's talk MLR real quickly on the competition update. We know that there are going to be 13 teams.
Yes.
A schedule coming out soon. Matt, you got to be thankful that there's going to be a 7th season in 2024.
Oh, I'm very thankful. And I'm thankful that you brought up the thankful shtick. Next.
Matt, last thing here. I think a lot to be thankful for the men's Eagles. I feel like we're trending in the right direction going into 2024. 13 games, I think, on the schedule. The Pacific Nations Cup. Potentially Scott Lawrence getting the interim tag removed. You got to feel good that 2023 is looking up going into 2024.
Yeah, some steps forward, steps in the right direction. We like that. Anything else, John?
No, Matt, just a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. And I'm so thankful that all of us in the rugby community have this to look forward to each and every single week because of you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm hoping that your Thanksgiving was beautiful as well. On that note, we have to take a break and come back right after this.
Digs like a demented mole there.
Need a great price on a new vehicle? Sheehy makes it easy. Easy Price shows you our lowest prices on the Mid-Atlantic's largest selection. Find your best price online or at any of our 31 dealerships.
It's easy at Sheehy. Sheehy.com.
You need your cleats? You need them tomorrow? If you order today by 3 p.m. New York time or noon LA time, they can have them to you tomorrow. Young, old, male, female, if you're playing on turf, if you're playing on grass, if you're playing in the rain, you're playing in the heat, they've got you covered. RugbyNow.com. go there now. And we are back with Mr. Kimball Kjar, the CEO of the Utah Warriors. And Kimball, it's great to have you back. All right, so Kimball, let's get to some topics. We're going to talk a little bit about the offseason. We're going to talk about the potential unionization of players, your expectations for the next season. All right, so let's start with the offseason. It's been a good one for the Utah Warriors, who are coming off a 10-win season for the first time.
Yeah. Listen, we it's kind of weird to say this, but we scraped a 10-win season together last year with new coaches or a new head coach, kind of a new environment and culture that we were trying to shift in a very positive direction. And we began to see some of the fruits there. There were probably 2 or 3 games that, we let, slip away when we probably shouldn't have, especially, that last home game and, a few others on the road. But listen, a good foundation was laid, and we've been able to spend a lot of good time building energy, excitement, and some positivity on top of all of that with some new coaching hires with Brendan, Jimmy. We promoted Robbie to not only be our forwards coach, but he's also going to be working with our pathway, kind of our developmental infrastructure. So we're starting to get more of our top level coaches down into our community and our pathway to be able to help bring people up through that environment. I think there's some pretty positive things that, we're looking at heading into 2024.
And you bring back Paul Mullen, who is from the Aran Islands, which is was the last place that the Irish were able to speak Gaelic. Is there any truth to the rumor that Paul has now insisted that he'll only do interviews in Gaelic and that you have to hire a Gaelic translator?
Listen, if that's the case, I would pay money to see this. Paul Mullen's got such a witty character and kind of a dry sense of humor, and he's always kind of pulling jokes on the guys. He's just got really good, Irish sarcasm that is always fun to have in the locker room and in the environment. And if he's starting to pull off the Gaelic, speaking in tongues, then by all means, I am there front row seat.
So what are your expectations for next year? Undefeated season, hoisting the shield?
I think really what I'm looking forward to is, we've got so much energy and excitement with this new coaching staff, with the players. We're moving into a new space. We're actually going to be looking at, when the schedule gets released here, we're going to be making an announcement about some big things that we're going to be doing at the end of next season in the coming.
Feel free to make them right here and now, Kimball.
I'll tease it. I'll set it up, and then we can circle back in a couple of weeks. I can make the announcement here with you. How about that?
Okay, we'll run it. Paul.
It's something that we're continuing to try to push the dial and make Utah, front and center, not only for the MLR but for rugby here in North America. And for me, it's a lot of excitement and energy because of all the hard work that's been going in. So I feel optimistic about where this team's going to land. And as Greg has, said publicly as well as, privately in my conversations with him, is as long as we make the playoffs, doesn't really matter where we land, because anything can happen. We saw that last year, even with New England, the year before with New York. It doesn't really matter where you land on the point standings, as long as you're in the hunt for the playoffs. Then go after it. So that's really what my hope and expectation is, that we're right in the hunt.
So let's talk about the unionization thing that's looming. In February, the players are going to vote. As of now, they're going to have a mail-in vote to see if they're going to unionize. What's your take on this in terms of how it might affect your day-to-day operations as a CEO?
Well, I mean, listen, I think, there's the public statement that the MLR has made, and it's similar to what I would say, which is we welcome the conversation. We welcome the opportunity to have these discussions, and we want all the players to make sure that they're informed and they're understanding of what this means, in terms of what this vote entails. So that's the first thing. Like, we want them to understand that, when this vote is being had, what that could effectively do to the MLR, to each of the individual players, there are ramifications that will come from that. And it's important for everyone to understand that. But, I think the second thing from that is that we want all the players to vote. We want them to have a voice. We want them to have say as to how, their personal and their professional careers are managed. So we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to cast their vote and to be involved in what that unionization effort looks like. So this isn't anything from my perspective, as the Utah Warriors, that we don't want to be involved, and we don't want the players to be engaged in this. In fact, we want it to be quite the opposite. And at the end of the day, it's a conversation of kind of where we're at as a league and as a sport here in North America. And if people can understand some of those dynamics, then, I think the clear picture of where and how this needs to be managed, will really set in.
What is the difference between a union and a players association? Because I've had members of both sides of this argument talk to me off camera, and there seems to be some kind of wiggle room to withdraw the petition to unionize with the NRLB, the National Labor Relations Board, I think, whatever one of that is, yep. And have a players association, which some say is the same thing and some say is not the same thing.
Well, I think the bottom line is it's not necessarily what I would define. It's what the U.S. government defines it as, right? A union, as defined by the NLRB, is an entity that is the agency by which certain employees for a certain classification of a group of individuals, whether it's from a manufacturing, it's largely a group that was set up and a law that was set up back in the late 19th century, early 20th century to help protect manufacturing workers and automotive workers, large labor relations union organizations, and the NLRB is set up largely to protect those types of groups, to be able to make sure that they're not working 80 hours a week for 10 cents on the dollar, that kind of thing.
Those are rugby wrap-up wages.
I thought it was for free.
Yeah, well, after the expenses, yeah.
But historically here in the U.S., when you file a petition with the NLRB, you're effectively asking to be recognized as a union similar to the Teamsters and others. Where that group now has all human capital and voting rights. Or representation rights for those people that work within that sphere of influence. And so, in other countries, in other rugby playing countries, a players association or a union is kind of a loosely defined group that's a little bit more organized than others, that has a voice and is involved with the conversation within the rugby unions, kind of the governing entities, the professional gaming boards, that sort of thing. It's not a government sanctioned and recognized body like it would be here in the U.S. I think at the end of the day, common sense is always best achieved by actually having discourse and conversations with other people face to face. But what's happened here is I think both sides are kind of pointing the finger at each other. There's the USRPA saying the MLR won't talk and hasn't talked, and historically they've had a talk track that said that there's been no communication or little communication, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, the MLR and some of the owners are going to say, well, you guys are the ones that filed this petition with the NLRB, and now you kind of have a gun being held to our head, that sort of thing. So it's one of those things where we're kind of at a point where I think everyone just needs to take a deep breath and understand what's happening. Yeah. And what this could do for the game here in North America. But more fundamentally, and this is my biggest concern, is like what this could do for the players.
I wanted to change gears a little bit and talk about a certain player on your side of the Utah Warriors who has put to bed, for those out there that are making this, the MLR is not contributing to the Eagle pool. Oh, yeah? Who just lit up the tri-zone the last two games for Team USA in huge wins for them on the road. And they're building their baby steps and building blocks, folks. So save your Reddit letters. But how about that kid that plays on the wing for you?
Yeah, Joe Mono's awesome. Listen, He's a perfect example of the type of talent that we have here in Utah, but also that I believe we have here in the United States. We had about 3-4 years ago, we had an open trial of sorts for our Utah Selects, which is our developmental team. And he came out for that, impressed enough that we said, okay, let's give this guy a look. So there was a couple things that he needed a little bit of experience, and development in. But I mean, good heavens, you put that guy in a 5-meter box, he'll juke you out of your shorts.
Yeah.
And his 10 to 20 meter, speed is just, it's hard to replicate. And you match that up against the physicality.
He doesn't slump.
He'll whack people. He's one of those players that I fundamentally believe if we can continue to develop here inside of the MLR, we can provide additional resources to help the U.S. national team in 2027 and beyond.
Excellent. An impact player from the MLR that wouldn't have been on the radar otherwise. So put that 100%. In your pipes and smoke it, you bashers out there. On that note, enjoy the rest of your Thanksgiving holiday, sir.
You too. Thanks, Matt.
So we'll be right back with Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News after this.
I wouldn't like to be at the bottom of that.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street.
This is the Rugby Odds, where an unlikely pundit panel of a wordsmith, a WWE legend, a rugby star, and a supermodel scour the globe, seeking best bets and bad behavior. Are you not entertained? Before we bring in Bryan Ray, I wanted to salute the coolest sevens tournament on the planet, the New York Sevens by the New York Rugby Club. They've been around since 1929. The tournament's been around since the late 50s. It doesn't get better than New York City and sevens. Get there if you can. Randall's Island. There'll be male and female teams, great competitions, great fun. And if you can't get there, watch it on the web. And we're back with the esteemed, the great Mr. Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News. You can also find him confusingly on Twitter as @RaysRugby or America's Rugby without the news. Bryan, how are you? Welcome back.
Doing all right. Yeah, how about that? 2 40-plus point wins for 2 North American teams in Test Rugby. When's the last time that happened? I wonder if that's ever happened. I'll save the best for last. So we'll start with Canada. They got the result. They got the win. They kind of had to get a win. They kind of played like they knew that they had to get a win. Let's be honest. That's a bad Brazil team. This team, that poor Brazil team, has just dropped so dramatically in level since 2018. Worse than Canada, obviously, which is just a terrible shame and kind of an indictment of world rugby again. But anyways, getting back to the game, good, strong performance from the Canadian forwards. Attack didn't really show much. They kind of said, hey, let's just get a win here and do what we know what we can do. And these guys are tired. They're unfit. We're just going to get the job done. Lucas Rumble leading the way, 3 tries. So yeah, from that perspective, it's nice to get a little bit of confidence to know that, hey, we can't actually beat the teams that we're supposed to beat. It was, like, I'm not going to lie, 10-0 down to Brazil 15 minutes into the game wasn't looking great. So I'm glad that they kind of, rebounded and got the win in the end.
Which ledge were you standing on? The one, the eastern ledge or the western?
Oh, boy, that it was stressful. But, to be honest, I didn't really actually think they were going to lose, even down 10-0. I knew that Brazil team was going to get tired. Maybe I thought, well, this is going to be an ugly win where we win by like 5 points or something dumb like that, which would have been really bad. But no, to their credit, they got the job done. It wasn't a great performance by any stretch of any imagination. In my mind, this tour showed absolutely no improvement under a coach that is completely under fire and should be gone. But hey, I'm glad for the boys that they got the win.
And you had some unkind words for Gareth Reese on Twitter.
I don't know if it's unkind.
He's a compadre of mine, you know.
It's frustration. It's frustration. Look, Gareth Reese is one of the best rugby players our country, some would say the best that Canada has ever produced. He's obviously, he's been a tremendous servant for rugby in this country. He still holds he's still an employee of Rugby Canada, but he gets on there in the commentary and he's saying, hey, it's marvelous to see Spain is going to have Pablo Bouza as their new coach. And he says, Scott Lawrence has said such a great impression on the American team. And it doesn't, is the irony not lost on him that the worst results for Canada and they're the team keeping their coach? And why? Well, partly because he's a good friend of Gareth Reese. So he has to understand that it's a little bit frustrating for us.
You can't possibly be intimating that.
Oh, no. Imagine that. Saying what everybody knows.
He's got his job because of Gareth Reese. That's the only reason he's got his job.
That's not the only reason, but it's part of the reason. It's absolutely part of the reason. I don't know. I'm not in there in the boardrooms, but it's absolutely part of the reason because Gareth Reese is backing him. That's part of the reason. And everybody knows it is. So, and it's, it's part of the reason. Come on. So it's frustrating. I understand he's loyal. It's his friend, but in my mind, it's not helping Canadian rugby.
All right, This we could talk like for 2 weeks on a show about Canadian rugby with you. Now I'm going to ask you to put your Uncle Sam hat on and tell me about what you thought about the Eagles.
I thought it was great. Did anybody really, even though this was, not the strongest Spain lineup, we knew that coming in. They lost a couple other players in between from the first test, but, I certainly didn't think they were going to win by 30 points. I thought they were going to win, but I thought it'd be a tight game. So, yeah. And, they look like they're having fun out there. They're making intercepts. Yeah, Spain's throwing the ball away. You have to say that as well. They played poorly. A couple of those were gimmies. But they played with ambition. Carty's putting cross kicks over. Joe Mano just barely slips through his fingers. That could have been another try. They look like they're enjoying their rugby out there. You can see.
You got a bench Mano right there. Just bench.
Absolutely. Drop them. You can see the difference in the energy that those guys have right now. They're just they look better as a team. They're more cohesive. They're feeling better. They have more energy. I was impressed. I thought they went well. Obviously it wasn't perfect, but so what? The return from those two games, 50 points. No, what was that? What's my math is way off here. 90 points. Yeah. 90 points they scored in two games. I don't know how you can possibly, really complain about it. To put 42 points on a Spain team that, the week before had done a pretty good number in Canada. That's pretty solid. So I got, nothing but good things to say about that, and a great way for Nate Brinkley to go out in his Eagles tenure. So, congrats to them, congrats to the team, and well done, Scott Lawrence.
Well, you bring up Nate Brinkley, and my intel, which may or may not be wrong, but it likely is correct, is that he has retired from the MLR. And with his wife and career in mind, moved back to the Boston area. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that's a big loss for New York. Brinkley, if I was naming an all-time MLR team right now of the first 6 years of MLR, Brinkley's in the team for sure. And he certainly, didn't look like he was old or slow last season. I thought he was you saw the impact when he was missing come the postseason, the game against Old Glory, right? He was missing and that really hurt them. I certainly think he has rugby left in him at the MLR level if he wants to do that. So maybe Mr. Tom Kiley is going to be knocking on his door when he arrives in Boston. So, I'd love to see him play again in MLR, but if that's the decision, then hey, he's had a tremendous career and kudos to him. Well done, Nate Brinkley.
Yeah, I don't know if seeing him in Free Jacks hoops It would be like seeing, Roger Clemens did pitch for the Yankees, so there's that. But one thing about Nate is that he is really smart, number one. And number two, he's got a great effect on his fellow players. And he leads by example. And those three attributes are not easy to find. So replacing them is going to be difficult.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you don't get domestic locks in MLR of the caliber. He's just a tremendous competitor, tremendous leader, and he does everything. So good at the breakdown. I mean, he's an outstanding player. I'd almost underrated at international level for 34 caps. I think if the Eagles just had more games during that time, he would have had quite a few more. Never let his country down, never let his team down. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, and he does have a lot of rugby left in him as far as you and I are concerned, but he's a guy that's always like one of the smarter guys in the room making smart decisions. So I'm going to tip my cap to him and defer and say, hey, man, I'm just happy that you're going out under your own terms, which is a unique thing in professional sports, right?
Absolutely.
Circling back to the Eagles, what do you think of Scott Lawrence?
Well, I think I made my thoughts pretty clear on Twitter for those who are following. I don't know what more you could have asked for the guy from the time that he's been with the team this year. I saw comments about a loss to Portugal and Georgia or something. Those are, Portugal, definitely, I think he'd want that one back, but I thought it was a very respectable performance against a good Georgia team, and he had just taken over. Again, I think you see the energy in the team, the ways things have turned around. Every comment that I'm hearing from camp is positive, completely positive. So I don't know why you would not want to keep, a young American coach who knows the landscape. He's got a nice group of assistant coaches underneath him, working like that. And you can see the impact he's making on the whole program, the under-20s, everything, the way he's integrating, everything within that system. I think it would be nuts, frankly, to not give him the permanent spot.
Agreed. And he had a resounding endorsement from Alex Corbacero, the all-world prop turned all-world broadcaster. And Alex went out of his way on social media to say exactly what you're saying. And I'm saying, well, if Ray and Corbs are in on it, McCarthy's in on it. So, because I just piggyback whatever you two do anyway. So, I can't agree more. Give Scott Lawrence, who commands a clubhouse, but also knows the American rugby landscape and Canadian rugby landscape arguably better than anybody else. And that's a key element here, a key element. You can't come over from overseas where England is tiny that you could put in New York and expect to know what the United States and coaching and rugby is like on this grass, this landscape. Final thoughts, Bryan.
Just a shout out to these guys, Chicago Hounds Academy, playing their first ever game against Houston, a Rugby HDX, that academy. Love to see MLR Academy teams playing. Congrats to the Hounds for getting a win in their first game. So more of that, please. I hope we see some of that in the regular season. We'd love to see academy sides playing midweek.
And on that note, we are out of time. I want to thank you, Mr. Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News, and thank John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning, and thank Kimball Kjar, the CEO of the Utah Warriors, and thank you for tuning in. Please check out our other shows, including the critically acclaimed The Rugby Odds, the College Rugby Wrap-Up. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Tell a friend about us. Sign up for our weekly newsletter, and please join our American Red Cross blood donor team.